Mercedes 450 SLC 5.0. Occasionally on this channel I'll make a comment or two about how one of the last really accessible collectible Mercedes that nobody knows about is the 450 SLC 5.0. And while it's not as prestigious as a Gullwing or as rare and elusive as a 300S Cabriolet or as imposing as a 600, the car deserves its own footnote in Mercedes-Benz history, because at the time Mercedes believed that they could take the R107, or C107 in this case, and turn it into a viable rally car. One of the problems with the C107 was that it had been conceived as a grand tourer. It wasn't really a sports car. It was heavy and robust and designed for hundreds of thousands of highway miles. What it was not initially designed for was flat out driving on bad roads. Although this was supposed to be a Mercedes-Benz hallmark, it turned out that the car was actually a better rally car than we could have imagined. Now, where did this whole thing come from? Contrary to what a lot of people think, the 5-liter SLC, also known by its factory designation 107.026, was not the first 107 to be equipped with competition parts. Instead, there was a flirtation or an interest from Mercedes with this concept of the 350 SLC, which was the first incarnation of the SLC model. These cars started appearing with cast aluminum rear control arms and anti-dive geometry in the rear braking system. In addition, there were all sorts of other parts that began to migrate from the competition world into the actual, maybe the word is homologation part world. It's sort of a difficult concept to explain, but when you have a part that's designed to be raced, usually the Formula One Association or the World Rally Association or whatever association you're racing under dictates that some specific parts that are developed for racing be integrated into production models. And these homologation parts are what make cars like the 450 SLC 5.0 so special. But the 350 SLC started to utilize some of these homologation parts, whether it was the rear subframe and braking system or items like a skid plate. Where were these strange parts coming from? Limited slip differentials, which were always used as a road car option, suddenly became beefier and stronger. They weren't the same castings that you'd find in a normal rear axle like in a W108 or 109. When you looked at these rear axles with a limited slip differential in them, they were all beefed up. And then, of course, there were modifications to the exhaust system. There were some other strange things too that started to appear, like modifications of the subframe, because Mercedes had developed a better subframe for the 107 that wasn't prone to tearing its lower control arm mounting points off. But let's not stray too far here from the story. When the 450 SLC 5.0 appeared in 1978, it looked like a conventional SLC until the rally or competition version was unveiled. The car did not have a manual transmission. Mercedes used their standard 722.1 3-speed automatic, but with the beefed up differential and rear suspension control arms, the stiffened subframe that had already been developed, as well as the skid plate, and believe it or not, an improved air conditioning system, which we could go into the minor details of, but these cars weren't running the automatic climate control systems from US cars. Instead, they were running a bigger, thicker AC condenser. as well as an improved, well, I wouldn't say it was a huge improvement, but they were running some improved climate control and ventilation controls, because when you're rallying your car in the summer, it gets real hot inside that car. And you want your drivers to be as comfortable as possible, because then they actually know what they're doing. So all these rally cars were fitted with factory AC systems. These cars were unleashed in the world stage in rallies like the East African Safari Rally. They were also used on other transcontinental rallies that most cars would not be able to finish in their production versions, let alone really even get through a third of the rally. But Mercedes had fierce competition from Datsun, and at the time they were also running W123 280Es, which are another footnote in Mercedes history that we'll have to talk about. But during its 3-year production run, the 450 SLC 5.0 and eventually the 500 SLC, when it was fitted with improvements to the transmission, did pretty well. It didn't do great, but it had some first and third place finishes in some of the rallies it did. And honestly, the longer and more horrible and grueling and terrible the rally was, the better these cars did. Mercedes actually built a bespoke M117.960 engine for the 5-liter SLC. This was the same engine that you'd find in a European spec 450 SLC, but with a bigger bore, as well as an aluminum engine block. And this engine was tuned to develop 240 horsepower on paper, but most people who drive these things, including myself, would suggest that they maybe have a little bit more power than Mercedes stated on paper. These insane cars were not exactly easy to get a hold of either. They weren't just for sale at your local Mercedes dealership. You had to walk into the dealership, and if you could afford it, you had to special order one. To make things even more difficult, they were really only available outside of the North American market, and so the majority of them were sold in Europe. The ones that did make it to the United States were gray market cars that were imported during the early 1980s, when the ratio of the dollar to the Deutschmark resulted in dollars having a significant purchasing power difference compared to any European currency. This resulted in Americans going and buying many unusual Mercedes, and that was how so many 5-liter SLCs ended up here. But there were also some celebrity owners of these cars, Diego Maradona being one of them, as well as supposedly the Sultan of Brunei, maybe, I don't know. I heard this is true, might not be true, but a lot of these cars were also sent to AMG and customized, so there are some 5-liter SLCs with AMG tuning that are floating around, but there aren't many of them. These cars are unique because they came in many different option levels. You had cars that were fitted with leather and air conditioning and even automatic climate control, power windows, power sunroofs, wild color schemes like silver blue metallic with red leather. Or you had cars that were so plain Jane you wondered if the person was buying them to rally them themselves. Cars that didn't even have air conditioning, steel wheels, wind-up windows, Caro or cloth seats. Some of these cars were in fact built in a way where they were so poverty spec you wondered what the person's end goal was, but you see all sorts of interesting Mercedes from the European market, and because of Europe's anti-bundling laws, which my friend Rod told me about, it seems very likely that you would never get two 5-liter SLCs that are the same. Now, let's talk about these cars in today's market. The 5-liter SLC occupies a place in the Mercedes value system where really great examples can sell for upwards of $50,000, but examples that need anything are automatically discarded as sub $10,000 cars, whereas $15,000 to $20,000 cars that have some needs but are not total basket cases tend to languish. Just like 126 coupes, these cars tend to invite the pickiest buyers. Cars with velour often get snubbed for cars with leather. Cars in plain color schemes often get snubbed for cars that have unique or rally spec colors, which would be silver on blue. And cars that have rust often get hoarded, sent to Europe, and restored over there because the European market appreciates these things a lot more. I've had people approach me about finding 5-liter SLCs. Often when they see what the selection is like, they tend to lose interest and gravitate towards something more normative, such as a Pagoda or even a 560 SL. So these cars are still underappreciated, and if you do want to grab a unique piece of Mercedes history, this is a very intelligent vehicle to purchase because I don't understand how they're so undervalued in today's market. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you've ever driven or experienced a Euro spec SLC, please tell us what it was like in the comments so you can encourage more people to pursue these amazing cars. We'll see you in the next video.